Something funny? I grew up my whole life eating brown rice, thinking that I was better than everybody else. And only to find out in my adult age, probably about maybe 3, 4 years ago, that brown rice, though it is good and it's nutritious, it's not that much better, if at any, than white rice. Welcome back to the Chef Boy RDN podcast with your host, Chef Boy RDN. And today, if you haven't guessed, we are talking all about carbohydrates. We started out talking about protein, talking about what it does in the body, and how we use it effectively. We talked about amounts for that. And then we migrated over into fat. We talked about fats that you should probably try to focus on, fats that maybe you want to kind of limit, and fats that you definitely want to stay away from, like trans fats, right? And now we are on carbohydrates. Now, we do have one more part to this series, which isn't technically a macronutrient, but it is under the carbohydrate category, and that's going to be fiber. So I guess it's going to really be like Carbs 2.0. But we're going to jump right into the carbohydrates right now. So there are a couple of myths that I get often or asked about often when it comes to carbohydrates that I just want to put to rest. So the first one is going to be that you have to get rid of carbs to lose weight. This is not true. Now, it is true that we often overconsume carbohydrates. It is also true that carbohydrates break down into sugar, which gives us energy. It is also true that when we have an abundance of that sugar, our body likes to store it as energy for later, and it stores it in our adipose tissue. So if we are over consuming carbohydrates, we will probably gain weight. But that's kind of with food in general. If we're over consuming food, we're going to gain weight. Now, if and I guess over consuming is such an oversimplification, but what I should say is if we are eating more energy than we're putting out, we're going to gain weight. Okay. There's other factors to it, but that's the cut and dry of it. So it's not that you got to get rid of all carbs to lose weight. You can definitely incorporate carbs into a diet that is focused on weight management. The second myth is that the only carbs out there are starches and sugars. Now, this one is one that really used to annoy me. And I don't know why I allowed it to annoy me so much. I think it was because, people would always have this better than attitude when they would say, like, I'm not doing any carbs. I'm off the carbs. I'm no, and it's like this underlying, like, yeah, carb eater, right? But the truth is carbs come in a lot of different forms. So a lot of times when we say we are getting rid of all of the carbs, we're actually not. If you're drinking milk or eating dairy products, you're probably having some carbs. If you are eating fruits and vegetables, yes, vegetables, you are having some carbs. So if you're eating beans, peas, lentils, you're having some carbs. So carbs come in a lot of different areas. It's not just bread, it's not just rice, it's not just potatoes, and it's not just candy and dessert. Carbs have a vast range. So stop telling people you're not eating carbs anymore. That's not true. You could say that maybe you're reducing the carbs in your diet or you're getting rid of a lot of the starches, but you are not inherently getting rid of all of the carbs unless you just don't eat vegetables anymore. And that's a whole nother conversation. So another myth is, what else I got on my list? To avoid all white foods. Now, this one is a myth that I still hear sometimes in the hospitals when it comes to people with diabetes. So you feel like you could no longer ever have any like potatoes, rice, white bread. Now, a lot of times, I'm gonna be honest, when people say it, I don't always correct them in the moment. The more that we meet, we'll talk more about it. But to be honest, y'all, and somebody, one of my friends told me that should be on my shirt. I'm always saying to be honest. I don't know where I get that from. But anyway, to be honest, we overeat a lot of simple carbohydrates, right? So if I told you that you could incorporate white bread into your diet, but you want to keep your carbohydrates to about 65 grams per meal, people ain't doing that. People are they counting the potatoes, the mashed potatoes as a serving of carbs, and then the bread is something else. Or they counting the bread as a serving of carbs and the mashed potato. They don't be putting stuff together. It's like if you got mashed potatoes, macaroni and cheese, yams, uh, a dinner roll, all of those are carbs, guys. So a lot of times, no, you don't have to give up simple carbohydrates. And simple carbohydrates typically tend to be those white ones, regular pasta, white bread, things like that. But you still have to make sure, number one, you're getting enough fiber in your diet. So when you tend to eat more white foods, as we call it, the pasta, the bread, the potatoes, most of those don't have as much fiber. Now, if you eat the potato skin, you're getting some fiber, but I digress. But that's why a lot of people just kind of let it go when people say, well, I'm not eating any more white bread. Okay, cool. Because you overeat it anyway, right? But if you ate it in moderation, it would be fine. Now, the last myth is fruits are bad. This one, I don't know where this one be coming from, but I keep getting this a lot during appointments and stuff that, are fruits bad for you? And a lot of times, again, these are people specifically who have to monitor their blood sugar levels. Fruits are not inherently bad. Now, there are some fruits that are higher in sugar, sure. We know that bananas, we know that pineapples, we know that grapes are typically going to be higher in sugar. We know that blueberries, blackberries, and strawberries are going to be higher in fiber and lower in sugar. So if a person has type 2 diabetes, I often recommend that they, if they want to have fruit, that they try to focus on those berries and other fruits kind of in between. Maybe have half a banana every now and again, but bananas typically tend to spike most people's blood sugar more than other fruits. So that's why you just have to be careful. But again, fruits are not bad. They still have the vitamins, they still have the minerals, and it's two different things that we're talking about. Just because something has more sugar than the other one doesn't inherently make it bad. It just may not be good for what you need in your diet. Okay, so um, simplifying things to good and bad is just not a good way to look at food, because guess what we do? When we deem something as bad, that's the thing that be on our mind the most. You got to get out of your head with that. We got to get away from the idea that food is good and bad. So those are all the myths surrounding carbohydrates. Now we are going to talk about simple versus complex carbs. Simple carbs. Simple carbs are simple. They break down really easy in the body, and they are made up of two different types of chains. So carbs pretty much kind of come in chains, if you will, chains of molecules, basically chains of sugar molecules, right? And a simple carb is going to be made up of disaccharides or monosaccharides. Saccharide is another word for just a sugar molecule. Mono is one, di is two. So a monosaccharide is just going to be one sugar molecule. Okay, an example of this is if you've ever had to work with sugar or did desserts, sometimes they will literally have glucose in the bakery area, right? Because you use it for different things. Glucose is a monosaccharide. It's just one molecule of sugar, and it's a big collection of them, right? But it's at its core, it's just one molecule of sugar. So it doesn't even have to break down in the body. It just kind of, you digest it, it goes into the bloodstream. So glucose can bring your blood sugar up really quickly, which is why when people suffer from hypoglycemia, one of the options is basically like a glucose gel pack that they can just kind of, I mean, I guess you wouldn't say drink. I don't know if you would say eat either, because it's kind of like a thick gel, but it pretty much absorbs into their body and it raises their blood sugar pretty quickly because it doesn't really have to break down. Disaccharides are going to be two molecules. An example of that is table sugar, which is sucrose. And this is a combination of glucose um, and fructose. Another example is going to be lactose. Lactose, people who are lactose intolerant, lactose is not a protein. Lactose is not an enzyme. It's actually a sugar. And when you're lactose intolerant, our body can't break that sugar down. And so lactose is going to be a disaccharide. It's made up of galactose and glucose. So all of that to say, they don't take a lot to break down in your body. That's why you have to be careful with simple carbohydrates, because they can raise your blood sugar really easily. Because they also break down into your body really quickly, they don't keep you satisfied long. So a lot of times you find that you are hungry a lot quicker when you're just eating simple carbohydrates. Now, going over to complex carbohydrates, these are going to be anything, any chain of sugars that are higher than disaccharides. So it could, have 3 sugar molecules connected. It could have 20. It could have a bunch. But these are going to be polysaccharides, is what we call them, which is just many, right? And so with the polysaccharides, the interesting thing about those is they also, complex carbs also tend to have some proteins or fiber or additional vitamins and things like that connected to them, which kind of help to make them more complex, right? And so with complex carbs, they take a lot longer for your body to digest. And so what happens is, especially when fiber and protein and things like that are in the mix, instead of it just going straight into your bloodstream, it slowly kind of drips in because it digests at a slower rate. And so this helps to actually regulate your blood sugars more, because instead of just spiking up, it slowly rises and it hits its peak, and it'll stay up a lot longer, and then it'll slowly go down. When we eat simple carbohydrates, what tends to happen is our blood sugar spikes up, and then if your insulin is working properly, for most people it is, if you don't have like type 2 or type 1 or any type of diabetes or anything that affects your blood sugar levels, your insulin will come and take all of that sugar out of your blood really quick. And then we kind of experience a crash, right? So if you think about the Thanksgiving itis, it's not because, I mean, part of, you did eat a lot of food, right? But it's really because we ate a lot of those simple carbohydrates. I mean, think about it. Candied yams. This is just straight up sugar on some sweet potatoes. I love it, but that's what it is. And then next to that, the mac and cheese. And don't let the mac and cheese touch the yams. That's a whole nother, if you don't know, anyway. And then next to that is some dressing, or stuffing, if that's what you want to call it. And then next to that is a roll or a piece of cornbread, and it's just like we have gone on this carbohydrate marathon. And so what happens is our body will get this huge spike of sugar, and then we kind of crash out, and everybody has what we call the itis. We're all tired, we're lethargic, we're falling asleep watching a football game. And so a lot of that, again, is because of those simple carbohydrates. Now, when you are focusing more on complex carbohydrates, it helps, again, to regulate those blood sugar levels so you don't have those crashes. And the cool thing is you can mix and match. So simple carbohydrates can totally be a part of a healthy diet. You just don't want to over consume it, right? Just how we gave the example of the Thanksgiving plate. A lot of times we just over consume simple carbohydrates. But if we're mixing them in with some complex carbohydrates and adequate protein, a little good, some sources of healthy fat, then we're making a balanced meal that helps to satisfy us, which means that we'll feel the feeling of full longer. It helps to regulate our blood sugar levels. It helps so that because we're feeling fuller longer, we tend not to eat as much or eat the next meal as quickly. So it helps with weight management overall. Now, what does carbohydrates do in the body? I already told you as far as the main thing is energy, right? Energy production. So when they break down into our body, they break down into glucose, or they might break down into fructose or galactose, but then they go to the liver to be converted into glucose. So it all goes back to glucose, long story short. And when they break down in the body, they actually go into the cells, and that's where they make the ATP. Somebody needs to go back to chemistry. So, or biology or anatomy and physiology, whichever one. So when it makes ATP, your body uses that for energy. Long story short. So that is what kind of glucose does there. Now, glucose also is brain food. Our brain uses glucose or carbohydrates as its main fuel source. It also aids in fat metabolism. So if you don't have the presence of carbohydrates in your body when fats are metabolized, they only metabolize partially into ketones, and that's where you get, you go into ketosis, basically. So what else? They also are good for energy storage. As I said earlier, our body super smart. It wants to save its energy for later. Almost too smart for its own good sometimes. I wish mine would stop saving as much energy. But that's what it does. So when you overconsume carbohydrates, your body is going to, it'll get rid of some, of course, but some of it is going to store for energy for later, because that's what our body does. And those are pretty much all the things that carbohydrates do. It's that quick acting energy source. So think about, and this is why simple carbohydrates are good. Think about when you give a kid a sucker, right? Within like a few minutes, they're bouncing off the walls. So it's going to give you that quick acting energy. And we need that. But when you pair it with complex carbohydrates, when you pair it with proteins, fats, and fiber, it helps to sustain that energy so you don't have that crash. One good example of this is carb loading. So this is what runners will do the night before a big marathon run, which is 23 miles. So they have to have good stores of energy. And they will carb load, and your body will store it. But when they go to run, they have all of that stored up energy that they can use at that time. So don't discount simple carbohydrates, just don't overconsume them. A good cheat to help you is just by using kind of the size of your fist when it comes to starches and simple carbohydrates. So if I got some rice, I want to keep it about the size of my fist when I'm building my plate. Now, where so we talked about a lot of the starches. Other things that are carbohydrates or considered carbohydrates are going to be fruits, vegetables, legumes, so beans, lentils, and peas. Also, of course, sweets. I don't really have to say that. I don't think those are going to be considered carbohydrates. Um, Potatoes, sweet potatoes. So sweet potatoes actually are in the starch category. A lot of people put it kind of in the vegetable. Same thing with corn. Corn, at this point, guys, corn is not a vegetable, it's a starch. After this, we all will know this, right? Say it with me. Corn is a starch. Okay. So both of those go in the starch category, right? But overall, again, they are carbohydrates. Um, dairy as a whole has carbohydrates in it, which is lactose. That is the sugar of dairy. So you can find that in yogurt, you can find it in milk. Um, those are kind of the bigger sources where you're going to find a lot of the carbohydrates. Okay, so the last thing I want to say about carbohydrates is making sure that you are really focusing on whole foods when it comes to carbohydrates. It's okay to have some processed foods every now and again, but the more that you are eating whole foods, the more likely that you are eating those complex carbohydrates that help you to sustain your energy levels. So, serving amount. So, with carbohydrates, you want to do about 45 to 65% of your daily intake of calories to be carbohydrates. For most people, kind of using the average of a 2,000 calorie diet a day, that is going to be about 225 grams to 325 grams of carbohydrates. The vegetables, you can do about 2/5 of those. Most people ain't eating enough vegetables in a day, so make sure you're getting your vegetables in. Do a variety. The more variety of carbohydrates that you tend to have when it comes to vegetables and fruits, the more vitamins that you get in your diet. That is everything on carbohydrates. We are back for Chef Boy RDN Tries It. And today, I don't know if it's Chef Boy RDN has already tried it or Chef Boy RDN explains it because the trying has been tried. But we're gonna try it again today for y'all to see. But today we are talking about Yasso bars. So the reason why I chose Yasso bars are they are frozen yogurts and they are kind of replacing ice cream bars, or they're supposed to replace the ice cream bar. And the cool thing about them is they tend to range from like 80 calories to maybe 100 calories per. So it's not a lot in calories. It does have some fiber in there or some protein in there. It tends to be like 4 to 6 grams, so it's not a lot, but it is good. And these are the three flavors that I currently have. Now, for me, I get bored. I'm gonna be honest. Can I be transparent with y'all for a second? I get really bored eating the same things over and over again. Like it's very hard for me to do leftovers. I know. I'm working on it. That's why I can't meal prep, but I digress. And so that's why you see all three of these, and that's why all three of these are open. Because I got to try different things. Okay, got to keep it fresh. Now, the thing that I like about these bars are they still give you good flavor. They give you, it's a good treat. It's easy. Um, and it's just not really calorie heavy. So it doesn't add to your daily load too much, and you can focus that more on eating those fiber rich whole foods, right? But this is definitely a treat. And what do I always say? Treat a treat as a treat. So this isn't something that I have necessarily every day, but I do have it whenever I want some ice cream. So it's just a great alternative if you're looking for something a little lighter, but you still want something full of flavor. Now, which one am I going to try is the question. So we got creamy mango. We have chocolate chip cookie dough, which that one is pretty good. And then we have coffee chocolate chip. Now, some more truths because I'm just an honest person. I don't really like chocolate ice cream. I really like every other flavor. I just don't like chocolate. I think it don't taste like chocolate. But I do like a coffee flavored or a mocha sometimes. If it's in a coffee flavor, it tends to work out. So that coffee one is really good. So I think that's the one I'm gonna go for. So as far as packaging, I think it looks pretty eye catching. I love that they kind of have the things on the front as far as the amount of calories per and the protein. So you don't have to search hard and wide for that, but it's right there in your face. So for packaging, it's gonna definitely get a solid A plus. Man, I open it up, instantly smell coffee. Love that. All right, so this is what it looks like. It's simple. Not too big. It's a good little treat. Again, at the end of the day, and I can literally smell the coffee in here. What can I say? Now, if you're not a coffee person, you probably won't like this one for obvious reasons. It's not super sweet, but it's also sometimes I feel like we act like a dessert ain't a dessert. Like it's not supposed to be sweet. I don't understand when people say, "Oh, I don't like." I get it not being too sweet, but it has to be some level of sweet. Like it's a dessert. Am I crazy? Anyway, so it's not too sweet, but it still has some sweetness to it. Definitely strong with the coffee flavor. Taste solid A. So all in all, it's an A plus for me. Definitely wins. It's definitely a good treat. Something for you to try, especially because summer is right around the corner. So it is getting hot, and it's good to have just something to relax and cool off to after a long day's work. So definitely go try Yasso bars. Again, it's not necessarily protein rich, but it's cool that it does have some protein in it. The flavor is amazing. Um, and it doesn't feel like you're cheating yourself out of anything. I think that's the best way to say it. So definitely go give it a try. So we are back for the vitamin of the week. The vitamin of the week this week is B1 thiamine, and thiamine is a water soluble vitamin, which means that it doesn't last in our body super long, but what it does is it acts as a coenzyme in several metabolic processes, mainly converting carbs into energy in the Krebs cycle. It also um, helps to support our nervous system. So those are the two main things that thiamine does. Now, where can you find thiamine? You can find it in whole grains. You can also find it in legumes, which is beans, peas, and lentils. You can also find it in nuts and seeds, pork. Believe it or not, pork has a lot of thiamine in it, and fortified cereals. So they do fortify cereals with thiamine, which absolutely nothing wrong with that. Last thing is sometimes people will have to supplement it, but that is something that is typically done by your doctor or your um, physician. Helps you to figure out if you need to supplement or not. Now, some of the deficiencies, or I guess I should start with toxicity. So, really, there is no major risk of toxicity. This is one of the ones that you'll just kind of pee right on out. As far as deficiencies, you can end up with beriberi, which can lead to muscle weakness and nerve degeneration. So we do know, again, it does play a part in the nervous system. And if you don't have it, you can have that nerve degeneration. It also causes Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. I probably butchered that. But with that syndrome, um, it's kind of another syndrome that can mess with your nervous system. And then just some regular symptoms. Those two can happen in extreme cases of B1 deficiency. So when it comes to general symptoms, you'll just experience fatigue, irritability, and muscle weakness. Now, typically, the way people become vitamin B1 deficient is through poor intake, or if you drink a lot of alcohol, or have alcohol abuse. A lot of times this actually interferes with our body's ability to absorb the B1, and so we'll find ourselves deficient in that. And if you have malabsorption in general, for whatever reason, any GI issues where you're not absorbing all of your vitamins, you can become deficient. And then the last thing is increased demand. So sometimes they find in pregnancies, which they'll test for your vitamins and things like that, which is why a prenatal is also important, that you can become vitamin B1 deficient if you have that increased demand of, an additional human growing in your body. So that is everything on B1. one. All right, so I hope you enjoyed today's show today. I hope you learned something. Carbohydrates are not bad for you. We just got to eat them in moderation. If you're eating simple carbohydrates, pair it with some complex carbohydrates, pair it with some protein, pair it with some fats. Focus on whole foods. Whole foods are going to be foods that are found as closely as you can find them, how you find them in nature, right? And focusing on complex carbohydrates is definitely going to do it for you. Now, next week, we're going to talk about part 2, aka fiber. This is the part of the carbohydrates that I didn't get too deep into. And I definitely want you to come back for this one, especially if you ever find it hard to go. Now, with me eating this coffee bar, I don't think I'm going to find it hard to go, but, we'll see what happens. I'll see you next time on the Chef Boy RDN podcast.